Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, and episode number 31, Trucking Along. Propertyofzach.com. There are great partners in this endeavor, and I want you to check out their website. They've got a ton of great stuff. I've been particularly enjoying the more in-depth reviews that they've been doing on, new releases and what have you. They've been doing that for a while, but I definitely like how they dissect records, and obviously it paints a better picture than just, reading whatever, a sentence or two about a record, because in this day and age, there are so many damn records that are coming out. It's difficult to be able to differentiate what you should listen to and what you should dedicate your time to. So yeah, propertyofzach.com. Visit it up. News, reviews, interviews, features, all that stuff. So go there. Yes, review the show on iTunes. I haven't been checking recently, but I think we're getting close to about 70 reviews, and that's awesome. So keep those coming. And also visit the website, 100wordspodcast.com. You can keep up with me and the show in between the shows, Tuesday to Tuesday, because I only post one new show a week. So yeah, you can kind of, check out what other shit is happening in my life in regards to music I'm liking, movies I'm liking, whatever the case may be. So yeah, check that out. And before we get into this week's guest, I just wanted to talk about some other things, like the election. We all experienced the well, not everybody, because I presume some of you do not live within the confines of the United States of America, but I'm sure you are aware of the fact that we had our presidential election recently. And it's funny because leading up to it, it's like, it's obviously such a rat race where people feel like they're almost beaten down to a point of where it's like, just let me vote and let me get out of here. Not even so much about the process, but just obviously all of the campaigning and political ads and everything that we are now subjected to. And maybe it's just because I'm more cognizant of all of that, but leading up to all of the previous elections that I've been aware of, which have been about four or five, I definitely am. I just don't know what to think of the whole process, because you have, on one hand, people that argue that the popular vote should be the one that dictates who the president should be. Then you have the Electoral College that says, obviously, this is a tried and true system and it shouldn't be bucked. And then there's obviously just so much divisiveness when it comes to certain issues. And it's cool that at least we're obviously having discussions about all these things. And I personally believe, and I mentioned this on a previous show a long time ago, that I think more people are identifying with the fact that they, whether they're conservative, liberal, whatever label that you want to put on yourself, I'd like to kind of, especially within the people that I know, they're more issue oriented when it comes to politics. I know my own personal beliefs. They definitely tend to lean more liberal, but then there's a lot of stuff that I also agree with on the conservative side of things, whether it's like the death penalty or whether it's taxes, whatever. There's a lot of things that I just find myself looking at the issue and then feeling and then going with what I personally feel is right, regardless of whether or not this is the party line, so to speak. And I think more and more people are identifying with that. And I think it's, personally, I think it's a more responsible approach, because that way you're not just, reacting to the color of whatever issue may be presented. Because, sometimes people just blindly walk forward and obviously don't really question why it is they believe what they believe. And I think at the core of it, that's all that we can do as humans. And that's part of our experience as we're sorting through all of these insanely nuanced and complicated issues. Because there's not so much black and white. There's a lot of gray area. And not to say that people should ride the fence on every single issue, because obviously that will get nothing done. Um, but yeah, so needless to say, I am pleased that we elected the person that we did. When I say we, that does give me a sense of pride. I love going to vote. I love the process behind that. Um, Whereas, I mean, I remember, I think when I first voted, uh, gosh, I can't remember exactly the first presidential election I voted in, but I definitely was super excited, when once I turned 18 that I could vote. Um, and I think some of that gets lost on younger generations. People are aware of it, um, but I definitely don't know if the sense of enthusiasm is there. And if it is, then that's awesome. And I hope that that continues, because there's obviously so many places throughout the world that obviously don't have the luxuries that are afforded to us. And I just think that we need to, keep that at the forefront of our minds when we're obviously participating in these democratic elections. Whether or not that you think a vote makes a difference, or whether or not you conscientiously object to voting, um, I get those points, but at the same time, I think you should let your voice be heard, even if you feel that's just a drop in the puddle, drop in the pond, so to speak. So, anyways, I'll get off my high horse, but yeah, I just wanted to address that because I do think that's obviously in the independent culture that we immerse ourselves in, whether it's art, music, whatever. There's always political statements that are made, whether it is directly towards politics or whether it's towards personal politics. And I think that people should be educated and obviously care about that and not become apathetic, because that's obviously when our society will get in trouble, when people are apathetic and they just simply don't care. And that obviously is what you see with a lot of places, where whether it's certain age groups or certain demographics, that they just simply don't care. But anyways, the interview. My guest is one of my best friends, Joey Cahill. He does a music festival with me called Sound and Fury. And more importantly, he runs a label called 61301 Records. Puts out, I mean, you probably name one band within the modern hardcore scene, and he's probably worked with them in some way, shape, or form. Touche Amore, Strife, Hardside, The Beautiful Ones. The list goes on and on. Joyce Manor, that was another one who I just saw recently. Yeah, I've been able to watch him grow this label from, just releasing friend stuff to now it's, what I would consider a major player within the independent, sort of bedroom one-man operation label game, which obviously is a very large and burgeoning part of the quote-unquote music industry. So yeah, one day after golf, I said it, I play golf. Joey plays golf as well. We sat down at my house and kind of just talked about a lot of different things. And I was stoked that he, for one, wanted to do that, and for two, felt comfortable enough in opening up to me. And that's what true friends are for and about, right? I think. Anyways, here's the interview. I hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you after.
There's two in particular. Where, I mean, one, obviously, like, when you and I started to, like, actually hang out and, like, get to know one another. I just remember you, like, buying merch at the Taken booth.
Poison Walmart.
Showcase Theater. Being like, hey, I'm Joey. I work at Bionic. And I was like, you're Joey. Because, like, everyone always was like, why don't you know Joey? Like, why haven't you spoken to Joey? And it's so funny because I look back where if social networking existed,
Yep,
we would have probably been friends much sooner.
Yeah.
It's just funny how that works out, where it's like,
people actually have to, you used to actually have to meet each other.
you're like, oh, like, I've heard of you. Like, that's, I mean, I know that still happens, but it happens so much more now where it's like, I've known about this person for however long, but you just never met him.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was fun. I was like, oh, that's cool.
You gave me a Bionic discount.
I did give you a Bionic discount. I should have just given it to you. Like, it's always so awkward in those positions where it's like, I mean, it's like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're like, everybody that obviously comes up to you at Sound and Fury, Joey!
$10.
Right. It's like, I don't know what to charge you.
Yeah.
So I remember that, and then I remember obviously like once we started to talk on the phone, like because
At night, just laying on our pillows.
right, yeah, just stay up till like 4 a.m. talking about hardcore. Because weren't we originally supposed to be talking about what each other was ordering and like collaborating? I can't remember.
I'm sure Kelly had some idea. Like, you guys should do this.
All right. So yeah, I remember that being our first interaction, but then the like where it actually came up. I mean, I remember sitting at Harbor House with like you and Brandon Bale, and where you were like, "Hey, you should like." I can't remember if it was like, "Hey, you should move in," or like, "Would you want to move in?" Like, we have a room that's open.
Is it Harbor House?
I think so.
I thought it was. My
Your remembrance?
Yeah, my remembrance of it was when after we saw AFI at the Palace or
right.
whatever.
I think Avalon maybe.
And then we drove to Las Vegas, and I feel like I thought we talked about it then, but I could be completely mistaken. I don't remember.
I think for whatever I remember that being our first like trip, really getting to know one another.
Yeah, and then that's probably right because that was a pretty random. I think that might have been the first time I met Chad also.
Yeah,
or like actually hung out with Chad.
Right. I think you and I were like that was already our plan. Like we were gonna move in together because it got brought up before that. But whatever. Regardless, like those, I just remember those distinct memories of being like, oh yeah, like this, this dude seems cool and like legit, and like I don't know the idea of introducing friends at like random spots in your life where it's like. Like everyone goes through these transition phases where you kind of like wash out your old friends, like just either because you grow apart or whatever. And so it's like, I remember distinctly thinking where it was like, like I didn't think that I was going to transition into like a new best friend or like have that come into my life because I was like, I thought I was kind of like, not like I thought I was set where it's like
got all my friends.
I don't think I need anybody else, but it was just like weird to have that all transpire and be like, oh yeah, like this is like really easy and like just fun obviously, and like what gravitates two people towards one another to begin with. I was like, oh yeah,
it's good times.
Yes. Did you have any, I mean, you've always, well, this is another impression that I've always got of you where it's like and tell me if this is something that you agree with, obviously. But the impression that I get of you is like you've always sort of illustrated the nice guy next door, where it was like, like, oh yeah, Joey, like, he can meet my parents, like if, someone's dating you and like, oh yeah, he can meet my parents. And like, total, like.
I think so. That was always my gripe with the ladies is that I was like, oh, you're just Joey. This is,
right.
Like high school and college.
Right.
Like, oh, you're just Joey. You're our friend Joey.
You're like, but I want to be more than that.
Yeah.
So you were easily placed in the friend zone.
Oh, I was instant friend zone. But I always would meet, I would always meet friends' parents.
Yeah.
I always felt like, I was polite. I was a polite kid.
Right. You knew
my parents did me good.
Right. You knew how to interact in different situations where you would, because there's a huge difference where I think there's the sort of, guy next door that completely like is forgettable, where it's just like, oh yeah, like that fucking vanilla person, like I don't remember him, but like you would leave an impression, and not obviously a negative one, where you'd be like, oh yeah, like Joey, like
he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, that's been your MO. That's
you
feel comfortable with that. Yeah. Besides the female interaction,
but it all worked out in the end.
Right, exactly. You're able to build past that. So, I mean, obviously, I know the answer to these questions. A few of the beginning questions, but where you were born and raised.
I was technically born in Downey.
Okay.
But I never lived there. I lived in Long Beach and grew up in Long Beach I lived there for 22 years.
Yes.
Before leaving for Huntington Beach. But grew up in Long Beach, went to school in Long Beach, went to college in Long Beach. It was all Long Beach.
All Long Beach all the time.
Yeah.
And what were when you were first introduced to this world, what were your parents doing at the time, or like what were your first, sort of memories? Like, because people have a certain perception of Long Beach. It's like they have the Snoop Dogg, ghetto area, Long Beach.
Yeah,
and there's obviously so many different facets to that city.
Yeah, I lived near the beach.
Yeah,
in like a nice area.
Mm.
I mean, it was close enough to the badder parts of town, but it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't a big deal.
Right.
Like I grew up there, and that's where I lived.
I
went to high school. Like I went to elementary school, like around my house, but I went to middle school in North Long Beach, which was in a nicer area. But and then college, high school was. I mean, Snoop Dogg went to my high school. Like it was in the bad part of town, but
right.
There was never any problems.
Right.
I mean, it was
you never felt that sort of air of danger in a way.
No, not at all. I mean, no. I thought it was great. I didn't even think about it. And then it was after, going to college and meeting people from not Long Beach.
Right.
Like you went to the same high school as Snoop Dogg?
Right.
Oh my, thinking
did you carry a gat?
Yeah, you think I was some hard
right.
I was like, no, I was in the gifted program. I was a nerd.
And what was sort of like the racial breakup of your school? Like were you as being a white person definitely in the minority, or was it kind of an even spread?
It was a pretty even spread. I mean, it was I think that had a lot to do with my outlook on life. Is it was a really diverse school, which I think is very beneficial, and a lot of people don't experience that. And when you come to you go to other parts of the country or come here, and it's like your mind's blown at these I don't know, it's weird. I don't even know how to explain it or even think about it, just because it's so second nature.
Right. Well, it's because it's something that you're always used to, and you're always used to being around, Hispanics, Black people, whatever. Race obviously was never played a part in your own head as far as there's did you know that there were certain quote unquote divisions that
you could. Oh yeah, I mean the school was really divided. We were in, the nerd set, and I say nerds. I mean, I didn't think I was a nerd. I was really cool.
Yeah, you were cool, right?
But we were in the the gifted program, and there was the school was broken up into quads, and we had our patch of grass for lunch, and then there was the quote unquote cool kids. They had their patch of grass, and the football players hung out in one corner. So
yeah, those divisions. I mean,
it was
high school cliques. Yeah,
but it wasn't racially divided necessarily.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't like a bad example of a West Side Story.
No, exactly. I mean, we did have dance fights all the time.
Right, which is understandable.
But
that's obviously why you love movies like Step It Up, because it resonates within you. Because you're like, oh, I recognize this.
Yeah.
This is kind of like my high school.
Yeah.
And so you, so what did your parents do as you were kind of, growing up and sort of, and that's one part. And then obviously sports were a big part of your, that is a stupid solicitation call. Anyways. So yeah, as you were growing up, what did your parents do for a profession? And then, how did you feel like your upbringing was in a certain sense, as far as you have a younger sister, and how did that all kind of play itself out as you were?
My growing up, I mean, up until my sister was born,
yeah.
We're 7.5 years apart. So I think one of us was a mistake.
Right.
We'll go
a gift.
Sure. We'll go with her though on that one.
Sure.
My mom was a teacher, and then when she got in Long Beach, she was a teacher. And when my dad started a lighting, a sales rep agency.
Oh, okay.
And so when she got pregnant with my sister, I think she worked in the administration office for a while, and then eventually just moved over to working with my dad, where she worked, or still works.
Yeah. What did she teach? I didn't know that.
Elementary school? I really don't remember.
Yeah.
I think she taught elementary school, but it's so weird to think of my mom as a teacher.
Right. So you obviously there was never a chance where you were going to have her at some point?
No.
Okay.
She taught in a completely different part of the city.
Oh, okay. Got it.
I think it was elementary school.
Yeah.
But I don't remember.
Yeah, sure.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, that's fine. Because you were obviously so young, you weren't really.
Yeah, I mean, by the time
attention.
she stopped, yeah.
Yeah.
But then, from that, so she started working with my dad when my sister came around.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the second half of the question.
Right. Because you were sort of the family structure that it was, how were you kind of raised? Did they, did you live in a strict household? Was it, what were your memories in regards to that?
It was strict not to a certain point. It wasn't overly strict. I wasn't allowed to, if I screwed up, I got in trouble.
Right.
But it was if I was I'm going to go play with my friends, it was just okay, be back at this time.
Got
and
it.
if I wasn't, then I got in trouble. But it's
Right.
like, that's my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was loose, but not. I mean, it wasn't a free for all
Mm-hmm.
of just like kids today.
Yes, kids these days.
I felt I think the way they raised me kind of helped shape who I am today, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe actually taught how to manners and being polite, which is maybe why I got the nice guy rap.
No, I know for sure. It it is something. I mean, the way that you are, and the way that I think that it's not. I don't think it's emblematic of how a lot of people like of our generation are, where it's like the idea of manners and just like making sure that even though we are a part of a weird subculture, that it's like for as normal and polite as we can act to people that are outside of that culture and be like, oh, like even though that dude is tattoos up and down his sleeve and does weird things at night with bands and music and stuff, that there's still somewhat of a
he's not like
well-adjusted individual. And I mean, I think that speaks. People want to be involved with stuff like with punk hardcore, what have you, especially from the initial like introduction, because it's something that's like inclusive in a way. Like once you get into it further, you realize it's like, oh yeah, there's all these different facets that could be exclusive to it.
Yeah,
but it's like you want to be a part of something fun.
Exactly.
And obviously like respectable, and be like, oh yeah, like I can trust my son or daughter like to that, because it's like, oh yeah, like Joey's into that and he's okay. Like, reasonable.
Yeah.
And so then your father passed away at an early. Well, how old were you?
7. I mean, I was a month before my 18th birthday.
Right.
So 17, but
right.
18.
Right. And so that is obviously a momentous occasion in a not positive light. Because I mean, obviously, like I lost my father when I was 27, so obviously, like we've gone through the same things except completely different ages. So were you a senior in high school?
Yes, I was a senior.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And he passed away unexpectedly. So, or you?
Yeah, he had an embolism in his heart, and somehow survived that. Was in the hospital for a month, going through physical therapy because he lost feeling from the waist down. And then unexpectedly one day there was an embolism, and then so he died. Yeah, it was, I think a month almost to the day from when he got sick.
Oh, it was when, okay, got it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, that initial thing occurred, and then obviously
it was the way we always look at it is like, I mean, he should have died that night.
So you guys were lucky to have.
And it was like that month was, just to, my mom, he always says like, that month was to get everything ready. Like he knew he was going to die, but like, say his goodbyes and get her set up in the business and, all that stuff. So
yeah, sort of a transitional phase. Yeah. But obviously still having him present. And so like, would you, prior to that, like, because obviously, well, not obviously, but it tends to be that, you're either kind of a mama's boy or like, a daddy's little son or whatever. Like did you have a close relationship with one or the other growing up?
No, I don't think I had a close, like, I think it was, it was relatively the same. Like,
yeah,
I guess my dad only because of sports. Like, he would be the one, that would take me to
all your games and such.
All my soccer and baseball. I mean, my mom would go too, so that's not really right. Like, there isn't really one, like, I mean, as a guy, I guess I'd say my dad, but not.
Right. It wasn't like this clear cut line. Like,
not at all. Like, not at all.
And so then, as that was obviously, as you guys were preparing for that, like, was that difficult for you preparing for him to sort of leave, or was it one of those things that, like, obviously, like you said, you felt thankful the fact that you could kind of say those goodbyes? Like,
I mean, I was shocked. Like, we thought, everything was fine, and that he was gonna, most likely be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Like, so my mom was starting to make preparations, like, getting ramps, because our house was one story, but it had like stairs leading up to the front door.
Sure.
And, getting everything ready and for him to come home. And
so the preparations weren't obviously for him.
So then, like, I mean, I was in class, and, when the guidance counselor came and like pulled me out of class, I was just like, huh? Like, this is weird. Like,
what's happening?
And it's so, like, I mean, the second I saw my mom, I knew what happened, but it was like, the last thing I expected.
Right.
I mean, I talked to him the day before. She talked to him, I think, that morning.
Right.
So,
Yeah, just obviously, like at that point, it was an absolute shock. And then did you, like how long did you take off school, and like how did you sort yourself through that process to be able to be like okay, like this is something like were you trying to be the sort of rock for your mom, or like what role did you feel that you were trying to fill within that, or were you just numb?
I was just completely numb. I took off school for a week, but I don't want to go back. School sucks, but
right, yeah, obviously.
I just kind of, I don't even, that whole week is a blur. I don't remember anything.
Right.
I vaguely remember the funeral, and a bunch of friends were there, but people that I would like, there's kids I grew up with and stuff that was like
you lost touch.
Like it was cool they were there, but I don't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they want. I think it was on a weekday. I don't know if they wanted a day off school.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I don't remember anything.
Sure.
I don't even remember going back to school, and I'm sure it was super awkward because then I was
the guy who lost his dad. Sort of. Oh yeah, we shouldn't we need to treat him delicately.
Yeah, and it was weird. I think.
When were you? Yeah, let's. Yeah, because you and I have never obviously drilled down deep into that scenario, but when did you feel like you were able to sort of come up for air and be able to process it a little bit more?
Honestly, probably 2-3 months after we went to family therapy, and that was the first time I ever talked about it.
Oh wow!
So that was probably it. I mean, still to this day, it's not fun to talk about.
Not at all.
But it's part of, I think, what made another reason of kind of who I am today.
Right.
Just going through that whole experience. But I mean, I would obviously take it back.
Of course, in a
heartbeat. But I think that was.
That's interesting. So family therapy makes total sense. Especially because it's obviously every person in the family is affected by something like this, and because death is obviously it's a part of life, but like you said, no one wants to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's you need to be in that sort of environment to be hey, look, I need to either process this or talk to somebody else about
and
this.
It's at 17, 18 years old, your friends don't want to talk about it.
No, yeah.
My mom would try to talk about it, but then we would both just probably break down.
Right, right.
And my sister's 10, she's having trouble processing it, and
sure. And yeah, and you guys are both trying to look out for her. So, yeah, but you're trying to take care of yourself.
Yeah, sure. And then I kind of got put in this well, you're the man of the house role now, and it's I don't fucking want this.
That's true. I never thought about that.
So it was weird. It was weird.
Yeah, you were sorting through a bunch of different.
Yeah,
you were trying to make yourself all right, but then obviously all these other things and sort of external pressures were throwing itself upon not only you, but I'm sure your mom and your sister as well. And so leading up to that, and obviously going through high school, from the way that you expressed it earlier, as far as not liking high school, did you care about your studies at all, or was it one of those things you were just kind of coasting through because?
No, I didn't care.
Right.
I was. I mean, I don't want to get braggy.
Yes.
I was one of those kids who's I don't need to do homework.
Right.
I would get. I would do minimal amounts of homework, get A's on most of my tests, and get B's in the classes. And it was enough to get me into college.
Right. You're this is a good pattern.
Yeah. And it was it was fun because I didn't, I'd get in trouble for not doing my homework from either teachers or my mom would find out. But it was it came down to it. And I think I graduated high school with a 3.0 and,
yeah, which is good. I mean,
it was enough. Yeah. I didn't care.
Right. And you were, because at that time, in high school, when did sort of independent music come into your life? And before that, what did you have any sort of aspirations on I would love to do this, or you're just kind of I still need to figure this out, what I want to do in the world, so to speak?
Oh, I mean, probably to this day still don't really know.
Yeah.
I got into punk when I was in 7th grade. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty young. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really understand or really know what it was.
You just musically started to become.
It all started because a friend of mine played me No Doubt and Sublime,
right?
Which sound weird, but
that's what's happening in Southern California.
Yeah, and then from that I got into Bad Religion, NoFX, and Pennywise, and then it just my whole world was
started to become consumed with that. That was all in junior high, and then kind of as you were entering high school, you were already sort of.
By the time I went to high school, I would buy every Epitaph or Fat release. the first punk show I went to, I think it was in '95, but it was no doubt Sublime, Guttermouth.
Classic OC lineup.
Social Distortion, I think, played. Sadly, I did not watch them because they are awful.
Right, because you love Social Distortion.
But I mean, so going into high school, like I was already invested.
Right. You had Liberty Spikes and everything?
No.
I'm just kidding.
I wore stupid Dickies and a white t-shirt pretty much every day.
So you kind of looked like a skater kid in a way? Like
we had our skate crew in middle school.
Uh-huh.
We would jump kids in and videotape it.
Really?
Yeah.
Jump kid. So skate. How big was your skate crew?
Probably like 20 of us.
Oh wow! So then you legitimately jumped people in as far as
terrible
things.
We would just punch them
right
in the arms,
right? Or they would face face towards the wall and you throw a tennis ball in their back or something.
Yeah,
right.
Nothing too crazy.
Yeah,
Kids are scared of us.
Really? So you roll? No,
we rolled deep, but no one cared. We weren't good enough at skateboarding.
Right. Strength in numbers, but then it was like, these kids don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah,
that's funny. And so you were still playing sports in high school. Like, did you?
I played soccer in high school.
Okay, and all 4 years?
No, I didn't play my senior year because I was an okay soccer player. I might have made varsity, but I was just like, well, I've got enough credits, so screw it.
Right.
I don't want to be here later than I need to be.
Right. Did you do dances and everything? Like, you said you were part of the sort of nerd contingent, but you strike me as a person that would be able to.
We were only we weren't nerds. We were looked at nerds because we were in the gifted program, but like we definitely weren't like they were nerds. And
right.
we were just like skateboard kids, but like there was a small group of punk kids, and it was our group of friends were like the punk kids at the high school.
Got it.
So we were also the outsiders in that sense.
Right.
But I would go to the dances. Like I had friends that were like all around, like all across the school.
Got it.
And like the normal classes and like the different levels and stuff. And so like it wasn't like weird.
You weren't picked on because you were right.
No. The dances sucked.
That's the one thing I remember, like, because especially going in as a freshman, where it was like the level of importance that's placed on dances, like just because this either culturally or like once you get into high school, where it's just like, oh, dude, are you going to homecoming? And I was like, oh, I guess I should care about this, like, and then once you I just remember distinctly like getting a fucking limousine, like the biggest waste of money. You were just like, my parents just blew $100 on this thing. This was so stupid.
Like it drove me there, and then it drove me home.
Yeah.
I didn't get to do anything fun.
Right. Like.
Yeah. It was always like the excitement leading up to it, and then you get there, and it's like, I don't dance. Like,
right. Totally. Like, what's exciting here?
Yeah.
It's only the setting. Like, I remember going to a dance where we were at Knott's Berry Farm, and I was like, once you're done with the 2 slow dances, that's all that people that aren't interested in dancing are in. Then you just can't go on the rides. But if you're like, hey, here's a ballroom.
Rides? Yeah, that's cool.
Which was awesome.
The coolest one we went to was at the Queen Mary in Long Beach.
Okay.
But our school was so weird. It had, I use these terms loosely, a fraternity and 2 sororities. And those were like the cool kids. And one of the sororities was called, I don't remember what
was it officially recognized by the high school?
No.
Oh, okay. So they were just mimicking this?
Yeah.
Oh,
but they would do like hazing. And,
how lame.
Like, the last thing I would ever do was join Sphinx, as it was called. They didn't even have like Greek, like it was.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the girls' ones were called, but one of them had put on a dance around Valentine's Day called the Sweethearts Dance. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, like they put on a dance at the Queen Mary, like where do they get this money?
Right. Like boosters, like that's a lot of money.
But so it was at the Queen Mary, and that was cool. Except I threw my back out the week before, and I sat in a chair the entire night.
Yeah,
that wasn't fun.
That doesn't make for fun evenings. And so, so you obviously, like you said, you started to go to shows like freshman year. And so, is it one of those things where like you went to your first show and it was like, that's it, like I am all in?
Yeah, it was like because it was. If you want to get technical, the first I went to was Pantera, and my dad drove me.
Which is incredible. Was it like, was music, like, did your parents care about music?
Yeah, my I don't remember my mom being all about music. my dad was into like country, which is weird because knowing him, that's the last thing you would expect.
Interesting.
But I mean, they like, you know, they saw, you know, growing up, they saw like, you know, the Rolling Stones and the Doors, and they went. I mean, they were hippies, so like I think they appreciated the fact that I was getting into music. So when I wanted to go see Pantera, he was like, "All right, but I gotta go." So it was me and my friend and my dad, and he just sat in the lobby the whole time.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, once I went to that show in '95, it just like opened the door, and like from there, you know, going to see Pennywise, and there was a show at the Pyramid in Cal State Long Beach, which was like Blink and Lagwagon and like all these bands that you know, today, like it was just a weird lineup, but it was cool,
right?
And yeah, it was just like my eyes open to like something completely different.
Sure.
Because I got, you know, I've been listening to it now at that point for like 4 years, but seeing it and seeing like, you know, the energy and the kids and the bands, it was like something I never expected.
Right.
So yeah.
So yeah, you were all in at that point, and then you started to get more into hardcore and adopted. Like, when did you start calling yourself straight edge officially?
I don't have an exact date.
Well,
I know some people do.
I know,
but I was about 18, so because it wasn't. I mean, I don't know if my friends were late bloomers, but it was at about, I think it was around 16 or 17 that they discovered alcohol.
Okay.
And so, you know, every weekend, like we'd always, you know, hang out all together every weekend, and then they would always get drunk, and I never like.
You never felt a part of it, yeah.
And then,
did you try? Were you originally kind of like, yeah, I'll have some drinks and like just to see what it's like?
One night early on senior year, I was 17, and we used to, this one girl's parents were there was those parents like, come over and party as long as, you know, we're here then. Yeah. So I mean, every weekend it was just people getting annihilated. Wow. And so one weekend I was like, maybe I want to drink. I had half a screwdriver.
A screwdriver.
Because that's what my parents drank. So I was like, well, that's what I guess I'm.
No, I know, because that's having that, like, your own touchstone for alcohol is always 100% what your parents drink.
Yep.
Like, that's like the only frame of reference you have.
Yeah. So I tell people that now, and they're just like, yeah, you didn't like it because it was a screwdriver. Right. It was like... But I drank half, and I was like, this sucks. Like, this tastes like shitty orange juice. So that was it. To this day.
That's a bit. Did you feel drunk off that? Or you're just like, no, this is terrible.
Yeah, I was like, this is gross.
Right.
So, yeah.
so at that point, that's when you started to like. How did straight edge just come to you? Obviously, by chance through music. Once you started to.
I mean, I knew, like, I used to go to a church camp every summer through elementary school and middle school. It was like a week-long sleepover camp.
Wow. Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah. And this kid.
Dude, the camp must have been just. I mean, I people still like. I love how that still exists, and it just blows my mind because it's like
It was insane the stuff we would do at that camp.
Right.
We had a gambling ring set up in our room. Like it was crazy. But a friend of mine there, he made me a tape and brought it and it was Minor Threat. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I was in 8th grade. I must 13 turning, or it was summer before 8th grade, so I think I was 13.
Right.
And it had Minor Threat, so I was familiar with straight edge, but I didn't really get into hardcore. I mean, the lines were so. Oh yeah. For me, I mean, were so blurry back then. Like I had a Sick of It All record, but I didn't know what they were hardcore. Like I had an Outspoken and Mean Season, but in my eyes at that point, 15, 16, I was like, this is a metal band.
Right.
And I got the Sick of It All CD through Columbia House.
The 90 CDs for 1 penny. Yeah. That's awesome.
So I don't really remember what made me say like I'm straight edge. Like,
right. What prompted you to
I remember that? Like I went and saw Good Riddance at the showcase, and hardcore bands opened, like actual hardcore bands, and I was just like,
this is a thing. This is like a thing, like something that's like you can reach out and touch.
And so from that, it was like kind of like would search out those bands and see when they were playing. I don't remember. I think one of the bands was called Kill Switch, and they turned into Show of Hands.
Oh yeah.
That's for the only thing I remember from that show.
That's funny.
But from that, that's where I would start going to hardcore shows and
right. Start to identify yourself. Yeah. Start to X up and
yeah.
I remember, like, because I totally, sophomore year of high school is when I started to claim it, but it was totally like, I put straight edge on my backpack, like, wrote straight edge and wrote 3X's below it. Honestly, not realizing, like, how important it is to people. Yeah. Like, I just put that label on myself. And then a dude who I was friends with that was, like, into punk comes up to me and is like, oh, you're straight edge now? And I was like, yeah. And, like, he kind of was, like, sweating me, like, do you understand what this is? Because he was, like, a year or two older than me. And so I was like, oh shit, like, maybe I should do some more research on this.
I remember I was on AOL. Yeah. And I was talking to the only other straight edge kid I knew. And I was like, hey, like, I think I told him, I was like, I'm straight edge.
I've claimed
like, I'm straight edge. And he was like, repeat after me. And he was joking.
Right.
But he typed out, he was like, the straight edge to the Earth Crisis song, The Discipline.
Of course.
It was funny.
That's incredible.
He is no longer straight edge.
Which that was probably gonna be my next question, where it's like, yeah, how many of those people that obviously
it was weird in high school because he went to my high school, but he was super weird.
Yeah.
So I had no straight edge friends that I hung out with on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Until like second year college, first year college.
Right.
And then at that point I had, I think, 2, but they both lived in Santa Barbara.
Right. It wasn't someone you were going to regularly see. And so then you started to, go to college and do all that. And you were studying
communications.
Yes, that is a very general and safe major in order to keep parents appeased. And so where did you were working, I presume, at this time?
When I started college, because after my dad died, I was working at CompUSA, and it sucked. For those who out there, I don't even know if anyone remembers CompUSA.
I remember the store, but yeah.
So I quit there and started working at a little grocery store across the street from my house. And then I don't think I was really working my first couple years in college, and I needed a new car.
Yeah.
My mom was like, get a job, and I'll buy you a car.
Oh, nice.
Like, okay.
Yeah, that's a deal.
So I got a job at Michael's.
Which was also... It's funny because it's like you've always been able to have jobs that don't obviously directly relate to your passion within music. And it's like you've always traveled parallel to it. I mean, obviously you've dipped into it with, us working at the record label and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you're just like, I'm just slogging through this thing just in order to fund everything that I'm doing. Like,
I just remembered I did have a job. I delivered pizza.
Yes.
That was before, must have been before Bionic.
Yeah.
But that was with my mom's second husband, who also died.
Right.
Owned an Italian restaurant.
Oh, okay. So you're delivering for them.
Yeah, and then I quit, and then a week later a month or 2 later, I got busted by the cops because the head cook was selling drugs out of the back, which I distinctly remember him selling coke out of the back, but I was no longer there when it happened.
You're like, no, I remember that existing. Yeah.
Why are people always coming to the back with money?
Right. Like I don't think this is a normal operating procedure for restaurants.
But I did get to make my own pizzas.
So that's cool.
It was all right.
It was a good trade-off.
But after Michael's, I'd shop at Bionic all the time, the record store, and Brandon called me one day, who I went to middle school and high school with, and was like, hey, we need someone to work here because someone else did something.
Right. Yes. we'll speak about that in general terms. Yeah.
He's like, would you want to come down and interview? So obviously I said yes, and left Michael's after a month and worked at Bionic for the next 4 years.
4 years at Bionic.
2000 to 2000. It was Thanksgiving 2000 to May 2004.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do. I mean, obviously, everybody always looks at the past very wistfully and like, oh, like independent record store is so great, and it's like, because I still think that feeling exists in some way, shape, or form. Like, like getting recommendations from like Last FM or something.
Yeah.
Like it exists, but it's like definitely just having that sort of human touch where it's like, if you haven't worked at a record store or haven't been a customer at a record store, that's been sort of that regular where it's like, you always know the people. It's just like, oh, that dude's going to come in. he's going to be interested in buying shit that sounds like these 10 bands.
Yeah.
And like having that sort of...
It's weird to me that for the most part, like kids aren't, the feeling of walking to a record store and hearing something being played and being like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then just buying it, off the cuff because you heard them playing it. Like,
right.
I think that's, it's weird that doesn't really exist. I mean, unless you want to go to Hot Topic, but
right.
They're playing not.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one would argue that obviously, like the experience, music is not what they're primarily selling at Hot Topic.
Well, even like going to like Amoeba, like you don't have that. And it was cool going to Bionic before I worked there, or any small store, because you get that personal touch,
right?
And you get to know the people that work there, and they get to know you. Like you said, like other people walk in, and then you'd be like instantly like, "Hey, we just got these records in. You should check these things out."
Yeah.
And then they would trust your recommendations because
totally.
And then
and also like I distinctly remember there was a certain level of intimidation going into stores like that too.
Oh yeah, we were dicks.
Right, where you had to like as a consumer and a customer, you had to like work the courage up to like be able to step in and be like, all right, like I'm cool here, like lay off, clerk guy. Like you had to, I mean, as stupid as it sounds, because it's not like what retail environment should there be that mental process going to a customer, like, but it's just like that was kind of part of it,
Oh yeah, I mean, there were people we were legitimately rude to,
right? Like
they would ask questions and just be like, shut up, like what do you,
yeah,
it's clearly alphabetized, get off your ass and go find it,
right?
But
yeah. And so yeah, obviously where we met was through Bionic and everything, and then we moved in together, and then I remember how excited I was when you were able to tour with us, when I was like, hey, do you want to come to the road and sell merch? Like, because that was something that obviously I know you'd always wanted to tour and kind of experience that side.
Yeah.
And it, like, reflecting on that time and like looking at touring, for one, I'm sure there are obviously parts where you hated it, but for the most part, I presume that you enjoyed it.
There was only one part that I hated.
Which is completely fair.
He's from Canada.
Right. He's from Canada. It was a terrible, terrible experience. But like, did that taste of touring like leave you wanting more from that perspective? Or you were like, I got it. Like, I got touring, and like, I don't know if I'd really want to like continue to do that, because obviously it's a very distinct beast.
No, I definitely, I mean, I didn't really,
Mm-hmm.
I would, weekends and stuff, but those are,
yeah.
But no, I definitely, if the opportunity had come up, I would have done it.
Right.
I had a great time. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it was just fun.
Yeah.
Driving.
Right. Driving. Doing
More
more driving. A lot of waiting.
It just, I mean, even this, like the story, like I still to this day tell stories from that summer. I mean, specifically New Hampshire and
yes,
and the night in somewhere in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those memories will like forever be with me. That
never would have got elsewhere.
No, like that's not going to happen in Long Beach. Well, I guess we were still in Long Beach then. That's
we totally were. And so then, as obviously when we were on tour together and we had to make, because we were living in Long Beach together, and had to make the collective decision to find another place immediately, and that's where
my selfish mom decided to sell the house.
Completely selfish mom decided to sell the house. So that's obviously where the 6131 Records moniker was born.
Yes.
From my mom being so gracious as to help us out finding a place.
Force him to let us move in.
Totally. To be able to rent to three, like, we were early 20s at the time.
22. Brandon was 20. 21, 22, 23.
Right. So early 20s, and to be able to, it's funny because I never like hearing my mom's horror stories of like, I'd be calling these people and they would legitimately hang up on me. It's just like, oh yeah, I guess like as a tenant, you don't want these delinquent early 20-year-olds, but then
just having to like, they don't drink, they don't party. Just click.
Yeah, they're like, sure. I think everybody says that in their application.
Yeah.
And so then, obviously fast forwarding to the record label, and you obviously wanting to be involved from that perspective, obviously I existed around it and sort of in its early inception. But what made you want to be like, yo, I want to waste my money with a record label. Because, I mean, initially that's what it's like.
Yo, yeah. Initially.
Yes.
It's something that never even, like, really crossed my mind.
Right.
But it was just like, you know, we would have bands stay at our house all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd become good friends with them. And Sinking Ships was at the house one time and was just like, hey, we need our CD repressed. You guys should, like, you know, to the roommates, you should start the label and just put it out.
Right.
And I remember Bob Shed was like, he's like, do you want to do it? Like, sure. And I was like, what should we call it? And he's like, 613, obviously.
Right.
Like, okay. Like, there we go.
Perfect.
So yeah, it was never like, I mean, had that not happened, like, who knows if it, you know, would have started, but that's kind of was the catalyst behind it. And then it was just kind of like, oh, you know, our friends, like, you know, we did a Force of Change 7-inch, and
right.
You know, Outbreak would stay at our house all the time, and when Cruel Hand started, we're like, oh, we should, you know, we'll do the Cruel Hand record, and like, just like, you know, doing stuff for friends, but never really.
Right. When did you feel the switch of, like, because, yeah, I mean, most obviously independent labels start like that, where it's just like, oh yeah, like just releasing shit from friends, and then, you know, friends of friends and other people that you do trust and music you do like or whatever. When did you feel like it sort of turned the corner for you to where people obviously started to recognize it on a more national level, and like where it's like, oh wow, like 6131 is a legitimate, from even if it's like legitimate from like, oh wow, like 6131 actually, like, we've sold out of this pressing, or we made money or whatever, or if it was just that general feeling of like, oh wow, like that's when the
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the moment where it kind of became, to me, something a little more serious, was when, like, we put out that Permanent LP, because that was a band where we didn't know anyone. That was the first band where, like, we didn't know anyone involved.
Right. They just wanted to work with you based on,
like, we heard some songs on, I think, MySpace or something.
Right. MP3.com.
And then just emailed them and was like, hey, do you guys want to do something? And like, yeah, we have an LP ready. And it was like, okay.
Right.
And so they were like the first outsider band.
Yeah, non-affiliated.
From that point, it was like, you know, Pressure and Cruel Hand and, you know, stuff like that. I guess the first, you know, maybe it was when we did the Down to Nothing 50 Lions split. Just because at that point, Down to Nothing was, you know, they were a, you know, hype band, and like,
sure,
you know, that was the first record where kids, I think, actively like sought it out.
Right. Where it's like you put a pre-order and like, oh wow, like kids are actually,
we got
a pre-order matters.
Yeah. And so I think that I'm trying to go through the catalog, and that's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're gonna have those little mile markers where it's like, oh wow, like that was happening. Like, it's crazy.
And then, I mean, like, I mean, maybe, you know, and then, you know, I think it was 2000, because we started in 2006, and it was, I think, around 2007, 2008, where we did Alpha and Omega. Oh, that's probably 2008. Alpha and Omega, first 7-inch, the first rotting, or I guess the second rotting out 7-inch,
right?
And the Bad Seed 7-inch. Maybe it was the Bad Seed 7-inch, because they were at that point were like the ultimate, like, everyone, I need this band,
right?
I need this record.
Who's gonna put it out? And
then, you know, and that was, I would say Bad Seed. Was maybe the ultimate turning point where people were like, oh, people actually pay attention to what we're doing.
It's, I mean, arguably your most definitive release in regards to a national perception is, like, I mean, the Touche full length. Like, I mean, retroactively.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, I mean, when that was, I mean, Jeremy's been, you know, one of my best friends for, I mean, I've met him through you.
Yeah.
11 years ago? I mean, I don't even remember.
Yeah.
And they were having trouble finding, you know, getting someone to print out the record, and I was like, dude, I'll do it. And
right.
Like, really?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. And then, you know, it just kind of
snowballed from there.
Yeah. Which from, you know, doing, that was like, I think the one that's still to this day.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like that because there's always going to be one really, especially like from a sort of full length perspective, where it's just like, we have arrived, and like not in a, you know, egotistical sense, but just like, okay, people are going to reference that, you know, just as people are going to do with No Sleep, where it's like, Wonder Years. Like,
yeah,
oh my God, like those Wonder Years don't sleep. Or it's like, oh, 613 and a touche. Yeah. It's like, that's going to be that sort of earmark.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously now that you're older within the hardcore scene.
Yes.
As most people are that stay involved for as long as people like you and I have. And obviously because, you know, you and I both do Sound and Fury, and there's a lot of stuff that, you know, people have to make those decisions within their lives to like go one of two ways, where it's just like, all right, I'm growing older. There's, you know, real life shit I got to take care of. And like, I can't care about this as much, like for whatever reason, like external pressures. And then obviously there's people like you and I where it's like, even if we have external pressures, like we're still involved with this because we just can't, you know, leave it or whatever. What obviously, what makes you still continue down that path when obviously you and I could both easily just like flip the switch and be like, oh,
see you later.
We gotta leave that shit.
Honestly, I think the idea of not doing it, like what would I do? Like I like putting out records.
Right.
I like finding new bands. I like, you know, getting a test press and being able to listen to it. And it's like, if that were just to go away, it would just feel like this emptiness of like, well,
yeah,
what do I do now?
Right.
Like, I mean, it's tough. And there's times where it's like, I'm just kind of like, I'm over this. Like it's hard. But then, you know, like the littlest thing will happen. Like, you know, a kid will place an order and buy like 5 different 613 releases. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh,
that's why. Right.
Like, yeah. So it's, you know.
Yeah. You always go through ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your, and obviously because, you know, your mom has very little context for everything you've done within that. Like once you started to do things that were against the grain from her perspective, like, I mean, from my impression that she's always been supportive, but just like, whoa, like, this is kind of weird. Like how has she been able to sort of reconcile all that, knowing that it's not a trend in your life like, now?
I don't know. Like I don't think she really grasps it. Mm-hmm. I think with like it all, I mean, when, you know, when I was like, you know, I told my mom I was straight edge whenever that was. And it was, of course, it was around the time of like, you know, the Fox News Report and all the Salt Lake City stuff. And she was just like, oh, straight edge is good. And you could just tell that there was this hesitation of like, what is my son doing? Like,
right.
Like, this is bad.
Yeah.
But with the label, I don't think she really gets it. Mm-hmm. Just because it's so, I don't know. I mean, I think she thinks, you know, it's a hobby, which it is.
Yeah.
But
just like obviously like the travels that you've been able to do and like sort of the many random experiences that you've had all directly related to hardcore, like she just kind of...
I think she just thinks it's just my friends, like doesn't really put the music as part of it. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Like Sound and Fury, like I think she gets a little more just because, especially after, you know, the infamous incident in 2010 where there was like, you could search it. Like, I mean, you could search it on the internet now and like, you know, Sound and Fury comes up, but like, you know, the week after that, you know, it happened, it was everywhere, you know, not everywhere.
Right.
Like, you know,
yeah. Newsweek was picking it up.
Yeah. But I mean, it was
visible within our scene.
Right? And she was just kind of like, oh, like maybe this is
right.
You know, and
something legitimate.
Yeah. I mean, she would obviously never come.
Right.
And like, you know, actually see it, but I think that she gets more than the label.
Right. But she's generally like, just because it doesn't impact, you know, your professional output, she's pretty much just like, oh yeah, like Joey's having fun with this.
She doesn't.
This is cool.
No, she's not like, I think it's time you need to grow up.
That's good.
Like, I haven't gotten that speech.
But yeah, so that's funny that she's just kind of like, oh yeah, like that can be over there. And...
Yeah. I mean, like that's what I get from it. I mean, she could have something completely
that she just hasn't expressed to you. Yeah. And sort of now moving into sort of the next proverbial chapter of your life, because you know you are impending nuptials are happening, and you are doing things. You know, I like to frame it as doing adult-like things, but essentially you're still the same person. Because obviously there are people that, you know, they do those things and then they lose parts of themselves just because that's, you know, I guess what you're supposed to do in life.
Yeah.
So like, where do you, you know, where do you want to see yourself in regards to like you said, you're still trying to find out what it is that you want to do, quote unquote.
In a perfect world, 613 would be my job.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, I see it. It could potentially get there.
Sure.
In the next, couple years. But at this point, it's not. But so I guess the end goal is that
hustle to make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, as of now, just working for that.
Yeah.
And
whatever means necessary to get you to that.
Yeah.
That's obviously what you're working towards.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's never. I mean, if it doesn't get there, it's not like this was a failure.
Right.
If it does, cool. I'm probably, I don't foresee stopping anytime soon.
Right. Well, and you've always been realistic about everything within your life, as far as you don't pin everything on one thing, where it's just there are people that, and I mean, obviously it can suit people to a certain extent, where they're just if I don't achieve this, fuck, oh my God, what am I going to do? And it's you've always been sort of, realistic from that perspective, where it's I
can step back and just be at the end of the day, for the most part, it's a hardcore label.
Yeah.
It's not, there are very few hardcore labels that do this full time.
Sure.
If it gets there, great. If it doesn't, had a good run.
Right.
I have lots of cool records.
I got great test presses I could sell one day. Well, I think that's a more appropriate. There could not be a more appropriate place to leave things off. So cool. I appreciate you hanging out. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, it is. It was fun, because even people who have known us, or people like us who have known each other for years, can still find things to talk about in each other's lives.
Exactly.
There you have it, everybody. I enjoyed it. That was fun. Even though like I said, I've known Joey for years, we were still able to talk about stuff that not even I knew. So come back next Tuesday for another brand spanking new episode. Visit propertyofzach.com. And if you want to find out more about Joey's label, it's 6131records.com. And I'll see you next week. Be safe.